My name's Isabel, and this is my show, Things Fall Apart, The Centre Cannot Hold. The, the title of the show is taken from a poem by Yeats. It felt really appropriate and relevant to the times that we're in today, this feeling that a lot of things are falling apart, and the order, truth, everything we've known is sort of being sort of blown outwards. So the show centres around 4 different animals. We've got the crocodiles. We've got crocodiles, slugs, pigs, and rats, who have each been chosen for their survival capabilities. And the show is set in a post-climate crisis world where the humans have brought about their own demise. So, and these 4 animals have survived by mutating. They're ruthless, they're greedy, and some of them are making the same mistakes that the humans have made before them. In my mind, the mutant animals are kind of making the same mistakes that the humans have made. I think the human race we're very fallible creatures, we're very flawed. We like to think that we're so clever and we've got all of this technology, we've got all of these innovations, we've made an incredible society, but yet we are sort of destroying ourselves with our need for, we're not sustainable on the planet. We're using up all the resources. You can't have infinite resources. You can't have infinite resources on a finite planet. So we're sort of we are creating our own demise. And I think the animals that I've chosen are also repeating these same mistakes of greed, lust. They're very lustful creatures. But there's also this kind of enjoyment of life and enjoyment of things that there are, enjoyment of the world and of each other and of life, I guess. So yeah, and they've sort of picked things from human culture which they like, which they enjoy. So yeah, sports cars, smoking, Botox. They're just picking sardines. They're picking and choosing from human culture in a random way, but they're also things which I sort of think stand out to me sometimes of things in our culture. And maybe I've chosen them subconsciously, or maybe I've chosen them quite carefully to say something about how we live our lives. The stories within there's four written stories within the exhibition, I guess, and 4 animals, and they all sort of link together. I don't think there's one overarching narrative really. I'm sort of pulling little bits of ideas together, and there's things which crop up in each of the stories, like the cat milk cigarette factory, the floopy bar. People drink in the pig story. They drink floop secco, and there's these so there's there's characters that pop in and out. So and I tend to work in a series, and I find that one picture tends to spark the next one. So these stories sort of quite intuitively emerge, and it's almost like I can't stop. And I could have gone on with different branch off stories. If you could just take one little scene in one of the pictures, and you could write a whole story about those characters and what they're doing. So I guess I tried to be quite succinct with the show and keep it to these 4 different narratives. So I spent a month in Bronzefield Prison, and the only materials I had to draw there were some sort of there was plenty of paper to draw on, and I had a biro, which there's pencils and felt tips, but my biro was quite important to me, just because I really like the quality of line. I don't tend to do a lot of observational drawing anymore, so it was very difficult to be imaginative in prison. It's a very sterile environment, and just couldn't get my head around. It seems silly to draw a picture of a slug, or I couldn't really get that imagination going. So I just went back to basics, and I tried to draw what was in front of me. And it was a challenge to find scenes and draw, get the architecture, and because there's a lot of angles, and to find something new to draw every day. But it felt really good to sort of go back to basics, and it felt important to record my time there. And it was a really nice way to connect with people, because they would, if you see someone drawing, you know there's something quite simple and unthreatening about it. So people would come and they would chat to me and make some comments on my drawings, and sometimes I give them my drawings and stuff. So um, I think it just underlined for me the importance of drawing and what it means to me. And since leaving prison, I haven't, again, I don't really draw from life anymore, but I know that I can do it. And I think it was interesting to put those restrictions onto my practice, um, and do the drawings in prison. And so much has come out of that work after prison. So I think it was a really sort of valuable experience to me. So this is I call it the rat room, and this is Sardines, who's a major part of the show. She is a terrible Casanova type lover who's broken 1,000 hearts. And this is her sports car that she rides around. And the story, she's only got one breast. It felt important to sort of, I wanted to show her scar, that she's also got her struggles, and she's a survivor. It makes her tougher. And I think these scars that we have, that we get throughout our life, show our survival and our strength, rather than some sort of weakness or deformity or something that we should hide. So yeah, she's here. She's triumphant, and she's broke. As I said, she's broken 1,000 hearts. But her lover is a shoemaker who is trying to make these shoes and win her back with these tokens of her love. She's called Sardines. I envisioned the rats, the mutant rats, sort of trawling through the rubbish dumps of human waste and finding these cans of sardines. And if you look at like ocean futures, things like overfishing, things like sardines, which are now sort of tin of sardines is 60p, may well become a sort of rarity, and something really priceless and special. And so these mutant rats were finding all these packaging and tins and saying, well, what is these? What are these things called sardines? They look amazing. So it's sort of the equivalent of calling your child like Mercedes in the present day. So yeah, and all the shoes are based around sort of sardine packaging, and they're all made of paper mache. And I made one pair just for fun, and then I couldn't stop. And people seem to really enjoy them. They're meant to be very awkward and decorative and fun. Welcome to my prison cell. This is an exact replica of a cell that Bronzefields prison, where I spent a month after taking part in a Just Stop Oil protest. So exact dimensions, 2 beds, chair, telly, everything in here has been made to look exactly like that cell. And all of the accessories have been donated by other people who spent time in prison. So the blue cups and plates are genuine Bronzefields prison cups. There's even a pair of pants. They're not mine, but someone sent them. You get when you arrive at the prison, you get like a welcome pack, which has pants, grey sweatpants, bowl, spoon, tea and coffee, that kind of thing. So yeah, it seemed important to recreate this space, so that people could see what a prison cell is like. I spent a lot of time in prison doing some drawing, and on the wall here you can see some of my original drawings of the prison. There's a lot of time. You have a lot of time in a prison to do nothing. But it was really nice to have something to do, and I tried to do a drawing every day, and it really saved my mental health. It gave me such a great sense of well-being, and it was a really nice way to connect with people as well. In this cell, you have a giant slug as your cellmate. I wanted to sort of a visual joke about how these institutions turn you into a slug. They sort of make you feel very disempowered, very sluggish. A lot of people have mental health problems, and if you get locked in a room in a cell with not much to do, it's going to make it worse. So a lot of people were quite depressed and would just lie on their bed. Um, yeah, so I sort of wanted to add to the claustrophobia of the space. I mean, you might think it's a bit like your university halls room, but actually, if you've got two people living in here and you can't leave, then actually the sense of the space is very different. And you do have your toilet, which is just sort of in the corner, slightly screened. So, no regrets about going to prison. It definitely made me a better person. I think in terms of like my tolerance for the world and my compassion for people. Um, and it was something that I really believed was the right thing to do. The slug is actually called Burp and has a little story. You can hear the slug's voice if you go on my YouTube channel. And the slug has been here for so long that he's kind of forgotten why and whatever he did, he doesn't really know. I don't think he even did anything very bad, but it's sort of playing on that idea of um, it doesn't take it could be anyone. It's just sort of like things can happen in your life, and you may well end up in this situation. And it could be the smallest kind of thing, which doesn't seem so bad at the time, and then you end up in prison for years and years. So I think people's stories in prison were really interesting, and um, but I think the slug is more evocative of these sort of emotions, and he's quite sort of gross and fearful. I think there's a sort of fear. Um, I wanted to recreate this strange, weird space, which is not it's not a normal thing, and it's not a kind thing or a normal thing to lock someone in a room, um, especially without in this sort of very institutional, very bare kind of environment. This is one of the largest pieces in the show and took about 2 months to make. It's a mixture of woodcut and drawing. The crocodile is a woodblock print, which took about 2 weeks. So I made a proper crocodile and then cut him up and arranged him around the paper to look like it was a sort of swirling vortex. And then it took me a while to paint in the bolognese and the spaghetti. So I had to eat a lot of biscuits, drink a lot of cups of tea, listen to a lot of podcasts. But this is the final sort of climax of the crocodile story. There's the female crocodile Shirley, has been living in this swamp, and the swamp is filling up with human detritus, and she's suffering from grief and from loss. Her favourite aunt has been made into a handbag. Her mother's been taken to the zoo. So she's sort of trying to fill this hole with she goes to buy some she grows these legs after gnawing on a Nando's chicken bone, and she goes on this kind of rampage where she's trying to sort of fill the emptiness inside, which I think a lot of us are doing in this sort of capitalist society. And her greed and her emotions and this kind of huge sort of want and desire eventually culminates in this giant swirling vortex of spaghetti bolognese. This is the Slugfield's luxury prison piece, which is actually based on the architecture of Bronzefield Prison. It's quite a classic cross formation. Um, and you can see it's sort of playing with that idea of these businesses calling stuff luxury, but it's not luxury, it's a prison, so there isn't anything luxury about it. All that you can do is sit in your cell and watch telly. And the slugs serve you slug slop out of the little hatch in the side of the wall. So they serve up this sort of green nuclear slop. And everyone's sort of transfixed by their neon tellies. And then you've got some rubbish bags around the back. Um, it's kind of a fun picture, but it's also really dark and quite serious. And the Bronzefield's motto is quality of life services. And so these two women are they're getting wheeled in their little sort of wooden prison van. And the Slugfield's motto is quality of slug life services. And it's funny because it's such a stupid thing to say. Of course, you're not going to have quality of life in prison. So yeah, I think I'm using humour to deal with some quite dark subjects. And here, the women sort of turn into the slugs as they walk around, and to the point where you can't really tell who's a slug and who's a woman sometimes. And I think that's maybe part of the prison guard sort of juxtaposition of like, the tables could turn, and who's the prisoner and who's the one who locks you up. I think that's quite. And we're all humans, so well, these are slugs. This one is Sliggy Wiggy's Emporium Extraordinaire, and it's like a wig shop for slugs. And I think as humans, we always want what we don't have. So, and the slugs don't have any hair, so that's what they really desire. It's sort of this. It's such a cruel sort of part of being, is that you want what you can't have. In the last few years, my activism and my art have sort of become closer together. I don't think my art is about activism, but it's definitely about humanity and the sort of mistakes that they're making. But I want to explore that in quite a surreal and non-didactical kind of way. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what other people think. I guess perhaps it's a warning to people, but then there's a lot of imagination in this. I mean, this isn't based. This is sort of a big leap off into the imagination of what could happen. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say with that question. Um, I would say that the work that I've done with the prison cell and the prison drawings is definitely inseparable from my activism. Um, a lot of my other work tends to explore these deeper issues in quite a humorous, light-hearted kind of way. So I want to make it quite accessible for people. I guess like fairy tales, sometimes I call them contemporary fairy tales. I want people to be drawn in by the visuals and by the story, and for it to sort of stick with them, and then they'll be sitting on the bus thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's quite dark and that's quite deep, and actually it relates to this. So the narrative of these stories and the deeper meaning is really important to me. But I rarely do a sort of literal translation of the activism. But I think that things in my real life are really influence my work, and I'm always looking at what's around me, and the world and what's happening in the world, and being influenced by it, whether it's like overtly or subconsciously. I think these drawings, they look fun in the beginning, but as soon as you dig a bit deeper, there's a lot of sort of social and political issues going on in there.